The dust in the old garage had a particular smell, a mixture of dried-out lawnmower oil, pine lumber, and time itself. It was the smell of my childhood, of Saturday afternoons spent pretending the rusting riding mower was a spaceship, of searching for lost baseballs in the dark corners. Now, at 34, I was standing in that same garage, tasked with the somber duty of clearing it out after my father's passing. The official cause was a sudden heart attack. Quick, the doctor said. He wouldn't have felt a thing. A small mercy for a man who had always been so full of quiet, steady feeling. My mother, Eleanor, was holding up with a grace that belied the 50 years they'd spent together. She'd asked me to handle the garage. She couldn't face the physical manifestation of his memory, not all at once. My father, Robert, had been an accountant. He was a man of numbers, of balanced ledgers and predictable patterns. He wore crisp button-down shirts, even on weekends, and his laugh was a rare, treasured event, like a solar eclipse. He was a good man, a reliable man, but not necessarily an easy man to know. There was a reserve to him, a part of himself he kept locked away, and I'd spent most of my life believing that was just who he was, a private person. I was pulling down a box of old National Geographic magazines when my hand brushed against something cold and metallic, tucked behind a sagging shelf filled with cans of paint, each lid marked with my father's meticulous script: living room, eggshell, trim, semi-gloss white. My fingers closed around a small, rectangular box. It wasn't a toolbox. It was made of worn, green metal, with a simple brass clasp. It looked military, like something from a World War II movie. I pulled it out, the dust swirling in the slanted afternoon light filtering through the grimy window. There was no lock. With a quiet click that seemed deafening in the silent garage, I opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded red velvet, wasn't what I expected. There were no old coins, no war medals, no bundles of love letters. There was a single, black and white photograph and a small, leather-bound notebook. The photograph was of a woman. She was young, maybe in her early 20s, with dark hair that fell in soft waves around her shoulders. She was laughing, her head tilted back, and she was beautiful in a way that was completely unself-conscious. She wasn't my mother. My mother had been a blonde, her beauty more contained, more structured. This woman's joy was wild, untamed. She was sitting on a stone wall, with what looked like a vast, European city sprawling behind her. I turned the photo over. In a delicate, sloping script, it read, "For my Robert, with all my heart. Forever, Isabella. Prague, 1962. 2 years before he met my mother. My heart began to thud a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I picked up the notebook. The leather was soft, supple with age. I opened it. The pages were filled with my father's handwriting, but a version of it I'd never seen. This wasn't the controlled, efficient script of his grocery lists or tax documents. This was sprawling, passionate, sometimes rushed and messy. It was a diary. I sat down on an overturned 5-gallon bucket, the dust motes dancing around me like confused ghosts, and I began to read. June 14, 1962. Met her today. Isabella. She works at the cafe near the university. I was trying to order a coffee, fumbling with the few Czech phrases I know, and she laughed. Not at me, but with me. Her eyes are the color of dark honey, and when she smiles, the whole damn city seems to brighten. The entries unfolded like a novel, a love story I never could have imagined my father living. He was in Prague on a university exchange program, a young man from a small town in Ohio seeing the world for the first time. And he had fallen, completely and utterly, in love with a Czech student named Isabella. The pages were filled with their adventures, secret walks along the Vltava River, kisses stolen in the shadow of the Charles Bridge, whispered conversations about art and politics and a future they dreamed of building together. He wrote of her family, of her father who was a professor and who had welcomed this earnest American boy into his home. He wrote of the tension in the city, the grim presence of Soviet influence, the fear that lurked beneath the surface of its ancient beauty. And he wrote of his plan. He was going to ask her to marry him, to bring her back to America. I read, my throat growing tighter with each turned page. This wasn't just a fling. This was the great love of my father's life. Then, the tone of the entries shifted. The sprawling script became tighter, more agitated. August 20, 1962. The world is closing in. The borders are tightening. Her father came to see me tonight. He was terrified. He said the authorities are watching them, that because of his Western sympathies, and his association with me, an American, they are all in danger. He begged me. He got down on his knees and begged me to leave. To break it off with Isabella. To disappear. He said if I truly love her, I will let her go, because staying would mean prison for him, or worse for her. A life of hardship and surveillance. He said my love for her is a death sentence for her family. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. This was the Iron Curtain, not some abstract historical concept, but a real, terrifying wall that was about to crush my father's happiness. August 21, 1962. I have to do it. I have to be the villain. I saw the fear in her father's eyes. It was real. I told Isabella it was over. That I didn't love her. That it was just a summer romance. I have never seen a human being shatter like that. The light in her eyes went out. She called me a liar, but I held fast. I was cruel. I had to be. I told her I was leaving tomorrow. The words felt like acid on my tongue. I would rather have died in that moment than see the look on her face. But to save her, I had to destroy her. The next entry was the last. September 10, 1962. Back in Ohio. The world is gray. I feel like I have left my heart in a locked room in Prague. I will never love again. How could I? I have killed the best part of myself to save the woman I love. I pray, someday, she will understand. I pray she finds happiness, even if the thought of it feels like a knife in my chest. This part of my life is over. I will lock it away. No one can ever know. I closed the notebook, my hands trembling. The garage, my childhood, my entire understanding of my father, tilted on its axis. The quiet, reserved man I knew hadn't been born that way. He had been forged in the crucible of a single, devastating sacrifice. His life with my mother, with me, his entire identity as a steady, predictable accountant and father, it had all been built on the ruins of that other life, that other Robert. He had chosen a life of quiet duty over a life of passionate risk, not out of cowardice, but out of a love so profound it required the ultimate betrayal. He had broken her heart, and his own, to give her a chance at a life free from persecution. I heard the back door of the house slide open. "Jacob, you finding anything good in there?" My mother called out. I snapped the box shut, my heart leaping into my throat. Just some old magazines, Mom. I called back, my voice sounding strangely high-pitched. Nothing exciting. I quickly shoved the metal box deep into the cardboard box of National Geographics, hiding his secret within another of his collections. I couldn't tell her. I could never tell her. To learn, after 50 years of marriage, that your husband's heart had always belonged, in its deepest chamber, to another woman. That his quiet nature wasn't just his personality, but the scar tissue of a wound he carried for her entire life. It would be a cruelty beyond measure. I carried the box into the house, placing it with the others destined for the dump. But later that night, I smuggled the metal box up to my old bedroom. I sat on the bed I'd slept in as a teenager and looked at the photograph of Isabella again. Her laughing face, forever young, forever in love with the ghost of my father. And then I understood all the small, strange things about him that had never quite added up. The way he would sometimes get quiet and distant, staring out the window on a rainy afternoon. My mother would say, "Oh, your father's just in one of his moods." But now I knew. He was in Prague. The way he had insisted I take French in high school, not Spanish, which was more practical. French is the language of diplomacy, of culture, he'd said, and now I wondered if it was because Czech was not an option, and French was the closest he could get to the Romance languages of a Europe he had loved and lost. The single, dog-eared copy of Kafka's The Metamorphosis on his bedside table, a book he reread every few years. I'd always found it a bleak, odd choice for such a practical man. Now I knew. Kafka was from Prague. The pieces of my father, once scattered and meaningless, now clicked into a heartbreaking mosaic. A few days after the funeral, once the flood of relatives and casseroles had receded, I found myself alone with my mother in the living room. She was holding one of his sweaters, just absently running her fingers over the cable knit pattern. "He was such a good man, Jacob," she said, her voice soft with grief. "So steady. I never had to worry. He was my rock." I looked at her, at the genuine love and loss in her eyes, and I felt the weight of the secret like a physical stone in my chest. She had loved the man he became. She had never known the man he was, the man who had been capable of a reckless, all-consuming passion that could have gotten a family imprisoned. "He loved you very much, Mom," I said, and it was the truth. It just wasn't the whole truth. He had loved her with the part of his heart that was left, the part that wasn't a ghost. I went back to my own life, my own apartment in the city, but I took the box with me. It sat in the back of my closet, a silent, haunting presence. It changed how I saw my own relationships. The petty arguments, the compromises, the fears of commitment, they all seemed so small in the shadow of my father's sacrifice. He had given up everything for a love that could never be, to protect the woman he loved from a danger she couldn't even fully comprehend. Years passed. I got married to a wonderful woman named Chloe. When our daughter was born, we named her Isabel. Chloe loved the name, said it was elegant and classic. She never asked where the idea came from, and I never offered the real story. It was my first layer of protection over my father's secret. When little Isabel would sit on my lap, her tiny hand wrapped around my finger, I would sometimes think of that photograph, of the other Isabella, and wonder what had become of her. Did she ever marry? Did she have children? Did she ever think of the American boy who broke her heart, never knowing he had saved her life? On the 10th anniversary of my father's death, I felt a pull I could no longer ignore. The internet, which had been in its infancy when he died, was now a vast web of global connection. Sitting at my desk one night, the house quiet, I typed a name into a search engine, Isabella Novak, Prague. It was a common name, a shot in the dark. Hours of searching led me down rabbit holes of Czech social media sites, university alumni pages, and obituaries. I was about to give up when I found it. A small article from a Prague cultural newsletter, dated 5 years earlier. It was a tribute to a renowned art historian, Drive. Isabella Kovács, née Novak, who had just passed away. There was a picture. Older, her dark hair streaked with silver, her face lined with wisdom and grace, but the eyes were the same. The honey-colored eyes that had captivated my father. My breath caught. I used the translation feature to read the article. It detailed her life. She had never married. She had dedicated her life to the study and preservation of Czech Baroque art, becoming a respected figure in her field. The article mentioned she was a quiet, private woman, but a fierce protector of her country's cultural heritage. It said she had lived through the difficult years of the Soviet era with quiet dignity and unshakable strength. It noted she was survived by a brother and his family. She had never married. The words echoed in the silent room. Had my father's sacrifice, in the end, been for nothing? Had he condemned her to a life of loneliness anyway? Or had she, in her own way, built a life of meaning and purpose, a different kind of love story? I leaned back in my chair, the glow of the monitor the only light in the dark room. I thought of my father, Robert, the accountant from Ohio, and Isabella, the art historian from Prague. Two parallel lives, running their course on opposite sides of the world, forever connected by a single, devastating summer. And I knew then, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, why he had never told anyone. It wasn't just about protecting my mother, or even protecting the memory of Isabella. It was about the sacredness of the sacrifice itself. To speak of it would have diminished it, turned it into an anecdote, a piece of family lore. It was a pain so profound, so integral to the man he had chosen to become, that giving it voice would have been a betrayal of the choice itself. He carried it so that no one else would have to. He shouldered the weight of that lost love, that ghost of a life, so that his wife could have a husband who was present, so that his son could have a father who was stable. He built a good life, a true life, on the foundation of that silence. I have a daughter now. I have a wife I love. I have a career, and I have a secret. It sits in a green metal box at the back of my closet, a testament to the man my father was before he was my father, and to the even greater man he became after. Sometimes, when I'm teaching my daughter how to ride a bike, or helping my wife in the garden, or simply sitting in silence, I feel the ghost of that secret between us, my father and me. It's not a heavy ghost anymore. It's a quiet understanding. It's the knowledge that love isn't always about grand gestures and passionate declarations. Sometimes, the most profound act of love is a quiet, sustained, and lifelong sacrifice, made in the shadows, for the sake of the light in other people's lives. I look at my daughter, Isabel, with her boundless joy and her fearless heart, and I hope she never has to make a choice like my father did. But I also hope that if she ever has to carry a weight, she will carry it with half the grace and strength that he did. His secret is safe with me. It is the last and greatest gift he ever gave me, the understanding that the truest stories are often the ones we never tell.